Thank you very much for having me, give me the opportunity to tell you a bit more about my entrepreneurial journey. My name is Philipp, I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Mondu. Mondu is actually the third business I'm building after a successful career at JP Morgan during the global financial crisis of 2007 and 2009. I built my first e-commerce company, MyBrands, which we sold to Zalando. After that, I built a fashion e-commerce in South America called Tafichi, which became the largest fashion e-commerce in Latin America. We took that company public in 2019, and after navigating through the pandemic, my co-founder Malte and I, with whom I've been working for the last 14 years, we decided to come back to Germany and build a new business. One of the things that we learned, being a rather large merchant in South America, is that doing e-commerce, doing retail is really hard. It's really hard to build an inspiring navigation. It's hard to get the right assortment, to get the right pricing, to get operations, to handle potentially thousands of employees. And so even if you get that right, many times you still struggle because you're not financially diligent, you don't get the input KPIs right, you don't understand the unit economics, and you don't build a strong balance sheet. And with that in mind, we decided to do something about that, and we wanted to simplify the financial lives of SMBs. And so we started building Mondu. And Mondu is a fintech based out of Berlin, specialized in deferred payment, and I'll go into more details about that. But why B2B payments for somebody that comes from South America, in Europe, then going to Europe? Why did we go from B2C to B2B, and why did we find B2B payments so interesting? And the reason for that is that there are probably very few markets that are more meaningful in terms of size and potential than the B2B payment market. It's 125 trillion in size, of which Germany probably represents about 20%, Europe represents about 20%. And then within Europe, you still have a significant share of that transaction volume going to SMBs, and quite a lot of that, despite the significant need, being unfinanced. And then the question is, why hasn't B2B payments seen a lot of disruption in the last 20 to 30 years, whereas B2C has? And the answer is that B2B payments is significantly more complex. It involves many process steps on the accounts payables, accounts receivable side. It involves many stakeholders, and those processes are different depending on the geography, depending on the vertical, the company size, the legal form that you have. So it's just really tough. And while there have been quite a few solutions focusing on the different touch points of B2B payments, very few actually have found the common denominator. And for us, the common denominator is that companies tend to transact through net terms. That means if you ask a European company how they like to pay, 95% will say that they like to pay with net terms of 30, 60, 90 days, or some form of financing or leasing. And if you go to the US, it's very similar. 60 to 70% of transactions in the US happen through paper checks, which is some form of deferred payment if you think about it. And so having that in mind, we said, okay, let's build an embedded deferred payment solution. And given our expertise in e-commerce, let's start with something that we fully understand, which is the order management system, which is part of the accounts receivables of many, many companies. So we started with that when we launched a product early last year, and then we started expanding into the other points of need of B2B payments, which you can see on this slide, on the accounts receivable side with billing and invoicing, treasury systems, expense management systems on the accounts payable side, as well as procurement systems. And the next step going forward is to become a true platform. And that means adding more and more features, improving the value proposition of Mondu, eventually creating network effects that drive significant switching costs, hopefully, and solidify our competitive strength. And of course, all of that happening through partners that allow us to outsource part of the value creation around risk management, funding, and other parts of the business. But this is something we believe is going to be important going forward. Now, let's maybe quickly go into BNPL, our starting point. And different from what you might imagine, we, of course, try to build something that is as consumerized as possible. So this might resemble a little bit a consumer website, but it is completely different in terms of the processes that happen in the backend. So you choose a payment method, and we have quite a few. I'll elaborate on that slightly later. You choose your legal form. We have to authenticate that legal form. In every geography, you have different ones. And we approve that transaction in real time, performing fraud checks, credit checks, potentially triggering also KYC requirements. And finally, we approve the order. We do the reconciliation, dunning, collections, recovery, and we pay out the merchant early. And that value proposition has evolved over the last 1.5 years along 3 dimensions. Starting with international expansion, when we launched in Germany, we went then right after into Austria, France, Belgium, France. 2 months ago, we launched also the UK, and hopefully soon we will also be launching Switzerland. And then the second dimension relates to multi-channel enablement. We started with web shops, which involves basically 2 stakeholders. Quickly, we realized that marketplaces are relevant, so we added that as well, which is more complex from a KYC requirement, and on top of that, also in terms of fee allocations. And then we added also offline capabilities, where we allowed field sales agents and telesales agents to extend net terms through Mondu Sell. And finally, we added also additional value-adding features, moving from just net terms to installments. And finally, last but not least, also the trade account, which has been a hit. So the trade account, how does it work? It's a little bit like a bar tab. So you go to a bar, you hopefully don't drink every day, but maybe a few times a week, and you just pay that at the end of the month. You know what your limit is, you transact within that limit, and at the end of the month you have a consolidated invoice and pay all of that. And this is what it is. And this is particularly interesting for businesses with high transaction frequencies, for instance, food businesses that actually buy every single day with several suppliers at the same time, or car shops, or the construction industry. And the traction in the BNPL space has been tremendous. We've acquired hundreds of merchants that have transaction volumes on their own platforms that go into the billions. And so far, we've seen share of wallets that range between on average 20 to 30%. So the traction has been really, really good. And then the second phase of our product relates to the adjacent financial products around AP and AR financing, which I mentioned before. Those products are built on top of the capabilities that we built for BNPL. So we use the same underwriting capabilities, and on top of that, also some of the contextual data that we get on the platform. And so on the AR financing, we're talking ultimately about embedded factoring that we embed into invoicing and billing systems, and which allow the users on those platforms to advance their receivables. So basically factor the receivables and get the money in 24 hours. On the AP financing side, we call this the flex-based solution. It's the other way around. You have an invoice, you upload it into an expense management system. That system reads all the information on the invoice. We get that, and then we allow you to pay with the terms that you actually want to pay. And the beauty of that model is that those platforms have huge transaction volumes. They have a need also to monetize that transaction volume. And we get all the contextual information that we need in order to perform proper underwriting. Now, what's the next step? I elaborated quickly on this. It's the platform. So we have BNPL, we have AR financing and AP financing. We will be adding additional features, potentially in-house, potentially also through third parties, like instant payment, wallet features, and financial services. And this will create, hopefully, a flywheel that will generate also network effects. And the capabilities that we have, which we have been able to build in record time, will also be extended through third parties. On the risk management side, we're onboarding partners. On the funding side, we're onboarding partners. And the idea is, of course, to improve our value proposition and to become more and more competitive going forward. Now, I haven't done this all myself. Of course, we have a team of about 115 talented Monduneers. They sit in our Berlin headquarters, in Amsterdam, and the UK. We have also very strong partners, our investors, and also our equity investors, our debt investors. And they're very eager to scale the business. And so we're open to business. If anybody wants to reach out to me, here's my email. It would be a pleasure. Thank you very much.